The difficulties we have with tennis begin from the moment we pick up this device as an untrained person early in our days of learning how to play. And immediately when we pick up this racket and we understand at the basic level that in order to hit the ball, this racket is going to have to be square to the target down there to direct the ball there and get it over the net. So our default movement map is, when we have a light rigid object in our arms and hands, is to be able to maneuver this with our arms and hands, and we essentially square it to the contact point with a levering action of our shoulder, elbow, wrist. And this is the way most recreational players hit. And after a while we become fairly proficient at doing this, and we're able to make this work well enough anyway. So especially at low speeds and low swing speeds, recreational tennis, balls coming at us fairly slow, we can time this up fairly well. But even at that, it creates a lot of problems for us right away, because this levering action is going to close the face off right as we come into contact too quickly. So it's hard to time this up to be square at contact. And it tends to have a outside in swing path which closes the tip of the racket closed and drags the ball down low or pulls it across. And these are most common errors, are usually in recreational tennis. So we've been talking from the beginning that we want to think of this rigid device as more like a flexible whip. And instead of having our arms and hands be very active in the swing, where I'm basically controlling everything with my arm and hand, we want our arms to be relaxed and to be led by the body's pulling rotational action, and letting the racket in the hand passively receive the energy as it goes around the swing circle. But it's hard to grasp this new feeling. We've had a couple of demonstrations prior to this about using a towel and other things. This is a training aid called a rope bat. So it has a fairly rigid handle here with some substance to it. It's a little flexible, but not much. But then it has this very flexible middle section, and then it has this head part, barrel part of the bat, or this would be the racket head of the tennis racket. And so with this flexible line, all of a sudden we have a totally different problem to solve. So we're trying to get this racket head to come and square up at contact, our contact point, but we no longer, because it's flexible, we can't use our normal levering and pushing action with our hand, wrist, and elbow. As you see, it just breaks down totally. There's no control over it. I couldn't possibly time this to contact. So what do? When we first pick up the racket, we feel that the weight of the head of the racket. Just as in a baseball bat, we feel the barrel's weight, or the golf club's weight. Most of the weight is towards the head naturally. And the balance point, the center of mass, is very close to the front of this racket head. That's the balance point. Why that's significant is that when objects are pulled, they have a tendency to rotate around the center of mass on their own. And when they're pulled in a straight line, the object falls along, and behind the straight line we had the example of the handle of the racket being the car and the racket head being the trailer. So if I'm pulling a trailer down the road out here to the left, this trailer is going to line up to the left behind it. It's in a straight line, which is what we want at the beginning of the swing. And then when we turn the direction of the handle up and around to the right in a backswing, then other forces take over, and this racket head is going to want to pivot around and square the contact on its own, just because it wants to rotate around this center of mass With our training aid, the rope bat, the center of mass is here towards the end of the handle because it's pretty thick and heavy. This is fairly light even though it looks heavy. So the center of mass is here, and the rope bat barrel is going to want to swing around the center of mass, or if I'm pulling in one direction, it's going to want to line up behind it. So those are key concepts in swinging and understanding the physics of how we want the physics to work with us rather than against us. So with the whip, the body pulling whip swing, our focus becomes on the form of our body. And remember, we're going to have we swing from a tilted forward position with a slight side bend, and the basic form is this spiraling action, spiraling circle up and around with a very high throwing action. So our focus becomes on creating the right body form and pulls of our body, letting the arms be passive, and letting this racket do its thing. And it's gonna, no matter how fast or slow we go, this racket head is gonna square just at the right moment, taking care of all those problems that we have when we're trying to push and leverage the racket into contact. And so now with a little bit more robust swing motion and backswing, this is what it might look like. And this line here is approximately the contact point. So you can see that this will start to come around and square right about this. And then of course, as it passes, it'll go past and up. But it might look like this. I've shown you this body-driven swing from the same to the target angle, both of myself swinging the rope bat and Federer swinging his racket. Now I want to go over the two phases of the forward swing I've been discussing, the movement from the slot and the movement at the turn of the swing. As I noted earlier in the lesson, the center of mass of any object will line up behind a pulling force. With my rope bat, the center of mass is keeping the black barrel of the bat lined up behind my pulling hand. And with Federer, the center mass of his racket is keeping his racket behind his pulling hand. As you can clearly see, my hand and Federer's hand are pulling the racket to the left of the target from the slot. With the old linear swing model, what I called my father's Oldsmobile swing technique that was used throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and the models that most teaching pros still teach, you were told to direct the hitting hand and butt of the racket to the target and to keep swinging to the target through contact just as long as you can. I hope this video, along with my others, is showing you there's a much better swing technique that I'm encouraging you to adopt. As this phase of pulling from the slot continues, we see the first big advantage of this mode of swinging working with the laws of physics. With the rotational force of the body passively moving into the pulling arm, the lag angle between the player's forearm and racket coming from the slot is preserved. This angle must be preserved to be released at the turn of the swing, and this gives us much greater racket head speed than the old linear swing model. In the old model, where the player was encouraged to immediately point the butt of the racket at the target, the racket head would just line up in a straight line with the arm and the hand, so there would be no lag angle to release and no increase in swing speed. Continuing this phase of pulling from the slot, the rope bat and the tennis racket head continue to line up behind the pulling hand and continue to preserve the lag angle. Now we are at the turn of the swing, where the body pivots to the target and the hitting arm and hand start to pull up and to the right of the target. Now two forces of physics are at work. The racket center of mass works to rotate the racket head up and into contact, and the turn of the swing creates tremendous angular momentum and centrifugal force that send the racket head out further on the swing circle while accelerating it, like the water skier going around the ski boat that is turning. This angular momentum created by the turn of the swing accounts for 60 to 80% more speed than you would get with a linear swing path to the target model. To return to the analogy of the water skier and the water ski boat, with the linear swing model, the water ski boat is going in a straight line to the target at 20 miles per hour. So therefore the skier is only going 20 miles per hour. With the angular momentum created by the body-driven whip swing model, players can generate 60 to 80 miles per hour of swing speed, so 3 or 4 times faster than the old swing model. In the next few frames of our video, we see the rope bat barrel and Federer's racket head have both squared to the target at contact. And this squaring force is being accomplished without any levering or pushing action on the racket handle. Of course, as I showed you, a levering or pushing action is useless for controlling or squaring the rope bat. Federer is using the same pulling motion action of the body I'm using to swing the rope bat, and by working with the laws of physics, the racket head squares pretty much automatically to the moment of contact if the body form is correct. Let me summarize the key points about the body-driven whip swing model this lesson has been all about. First, this model preserves the lag angle coming from the slot, which means we are preserving the speed to be released at the turn of the swing. Secondly, this model will give you 60 to 80% more racket head speed than the old linear swing model. And third, this model will give you much more consistent contact, as the racket head will square pretty much automatically to the moment of contact. In sum, the body-driven swing model makes playing higher level tennis much easier. So to sum up, for the body-driven whip swing, you want to think of this as a flexible device, our arms being passive, our body being the active driving and leading agent, and letting the momentum and energy of our turning body flow out into the handle and around the swing circle, and that racket head will square just when we want it to square.